So, good evening, everybody. We continue tonight in the chapter 42, which, yes, we still have, we had quite a few classes still yet on this chapter, and there's still quite a few classes to go. It's relatively a lengthier perek, I would even add, in comparison to other chapters. But we move on. We're holding in the beginning of page Samach, Ukidiksiv, or maybe we'd start a few words before. K'mishomer Hazal Yogaiti umatzasi tamin. The Chazal tell us that if someone tells you, I didn't toil, and I found, do not believe him, and I toiled and I did not find, still do not believe him, but Yogaiti umatzasi tamin, that if someone says, I toiled and I found, you should believe him. So, in what context does Alter Rebbe bring this Maimer Chazal? So, this saying of our sages of blessed memory. So, we got to see what Alter Rebbe said before. In order to do that, we won't take much time, certainly not to repeat. Those of you who are constantly participate in the class and via online, or able to review the classes or tune into the classes online. We always mention that you could find these classes on the tanyaonline.com website, and and you can easily follow. As we mentioned, it's set up in a way that there's a separate scroll bar for with the text that you could easily follow. And so you can see this very last class, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about the point of investing with exertion and toil and effort and so on. In what context is the Alter Rebbe saying that, and culminating with this Maimer Chazal saying of our sages of blessed memory, Yogaiti umatzasi tamin, about toil and finding, and so on. So you can see this past classes, see all the other classes from the very beginning of Tanya. Easy to access. There's a separate scroll on the left side of the screen, which you could access any class, and move forward from wherever you are, from wherever you're holding, from wherever you want to pick up. So to come into this saying very immediately explaining why the Alter Rebbe brings this saying of this Chazal, this saying of our sages, is because the Alter Rebbe, in other words, Alter Rebbe is coming from the message that despite the inherent and innate das which exists within every neshama, as it nourishes, or literally unikas, that it nurses, if you will, as it receives from Moshe Rabbeinu. The Alter Rebbe explains that Moshe Rabbeinu imparts with every single yid his das, and gives the access of every yid to have das in the Elokus. We explained that it's not only about an overall appreciation, understanding in Elokus, but das is appreciating the concept on with clarity, with transparency. It's become something real, tangible. And what's becoming real and tangible? Concepts of elokus, concepts of godliness becoming real and palpable in the minds of a human being. How can that happen? How is that possible? And the Torah does say, Das Elokei Avicha, not only Tavin v'Taskil or Tachkin in the context of Chachma Bina, but Da. You have the ability to know, become intimate with these concepts. In other words, that this would produce the Avdehu serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'leiv of Shalim, with a complete heart, meaning to say, to be able to emote with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a human being, neshama b'guf, as a body, soul invested in body. How could that happen? How could that be? So the Alter Rebbe says, and that should cause these sensations of Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem. In the Gemara, the Alter Rebbe brought the beginning of this chapter, that speaks about every Yid, ultimately the message that the notion of Yiras Hashem, fear, true fear of God, is attainable and becomes the norm of every human being. How's that possible? But the Rebbe explains that this is from the Moshe Rabbeinu, which we have embedded in our system. Every single Yid, Alter Rebbe writes, Kol Beis Yisrael, every single Yid, Kol Nefesh Mi Beis Yisrael, men, women, child, and every Yid has that Yenika, has that connection from the Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu Olam HaShalom, which imparts with the Das Elyon that Moshe Rabbeinu was so part and parcel of. He represents the supreme Das of Atzilus, like we explained, this idea. But namely, Moshe Rabbeinu's clarity and elokus and godliness, you need not to explain or bring from anywhere. This was obvious, and this was evident throughout the entire Torah relating to us about Moshe Rabbeinu. Everything was elokus, panim, that face-to-face interaction with elokus. Elokus was, godliness was real to Moshe Rabbeinu. We mentioned this a few times. The Gemara itself picks up, and Rashi brings the famous, it was throughout Moshe Rabbeinu's whole everything we know about Moshe Rabbeinu was about Das and Elokus. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who was the Hashem used the entire tenure of Moshe Rabbeinu from beginning to the end was about bringing about the reality, the clarity in Elokus. It was through Kriyas Yamsuf. In other words, being the vehicle through which Hashem performed the Nisim, the greatest wonders and miracles of all times, the 10 plagues, the Kriyas Yamsuf, was all about Moshe Rabbeinu bringing about the reality. In other words, bringing clarity or bringing Elokus to the people, that it's something tangible. Look, see, Makis, to the Kriyas Yamsuf, the Mana, the panim, that interaction with the Kodesh Baruch Hu face to face, which Moshe Rabbeinu was such an integral part of, which is Matan Torah and so on. But one of the things which catches the eyes of the Chachamim when Yidden asked they were lamenting that they could not perform that sacrifice, the Pesach, the Paschal Pesach sacrifice in the Midbar, in the desert, and they turned to Moshe Rabbeinu, Salom Nigara, why should we not have, why should it be, we have that deficiency, in other words, not to do this mitzvah, particularly as we learn that this is the only time the Am Yisrael did the Korban Pesach in the desert. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, Imdu, just a moment, let me just turn to Hashem and let me hear what he has to say. And Hashem gives him information. It becomes one of the 613 mitzvahs. That's not just clarity, that's elokus in the most tangible and palpable manner in the expression of a human being, in this case Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu imparts that Moshe, which again exemplified by the grand Moshe Rabbeinu within every single Yid, hence every Yid has the Moshe within him, and therefore because of that Moshe within him, there's that ability to das alakevicha, to have clarity in a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and as such, that would produce a true emotion of Ava v'Yira. In this case, the pasuk emphasizes, and this Gemara picks up on the Yiras Hashem, which becomes so natural to the Yid again, because the Moshe Rabbeinu, which is embedded in every single Yid, the inherent Moshe Rabbeinu, which exists within every single Yid. But the Alter Rebbe says, and again, getting back to this, Yagaitu Matzas Tamim, is that yes, you have it, but you got to uncover it. You got to work hard to bring that to the surface, to that Moshe Rabbeinu within you to the surface. And the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe says, Yigia Rabbo, on the previous page, you can see it on 118. Generally, you can follow this with English text as well. Today, again, we begin, it's pretty much half, a bit less, maybe a third maybe into the chapter. So, but earlier in the chapter, the Alter Rebbe writes the Lashon, for that tzricheli Yigia Rabbo, and again, because it's inherent with the nefesh or the soul, but the soul is not divested of body. The soul invests in body, invests in the animal soul, as we all know it. And the body and soul have its own interests, as we all know it. And therefore, it exists, but nonetheless, the body, as Lashon Alter Rebbe, it's nislapsha beguf, body, and again, bodily needs, bodily desires, bodily inclinations, packaged with the nefesh bahamis, the animal soul, covers and obscures over that. So that das and lukus, which is embedded in every single yid, which is there, existent within every single yid, and therefore we have to uncover it. And for this, the Alter Rebbe says, you need an important and a toil, v'atzuman, an intense toil, intense exertion. Alter Rebbe says, kfula umchupelis, a double and quadruple. And we explained then, Alter Rebbe's lashon is very precise. And Alter Rebbe explains because, and the ways we have to take off these layers, in other words, the Yigiyas Basar and the Yigiyas Nefesh, as Alter Rebbe says, the first thing is the Yigiyas Basar, which should not disturb Levatishes Haguf, as we again elaborated and explained these words, which Alter Rebbe means, and he connects it to the previous chapters. Oh, the Sali Be'ered Nishmasa, the log, or the Sali Be'neheda, Mevachinle, the log, that the fire does not ignite because it's kind of a stubborn log. The material is there, but it's a log, and therefore it's hard to the fire to penetrate or to catch the woodness, if you will, of this very log. So what do? You crush the log in order that the fire should be able to hold on and ultimately penetrate and burn through to penetrate the log. In other words, you have to crush it. The Alter Rebbe speaks about bitush haguf in the style which the Alter Rebbe classifies what does bitush haguf mean. Again, and that was one thing. And then the Alter Rebbe says, Rasheni Sigiyas Nefesh, this exertion of the soul. And as he explains, and we elaborate on this, every soul is different. A lot of the stuff is because we placed new layers which weren't there initially, unfortunately, by our sins, particularly the Chatas and Urim, which the Alter Rebbe speaks about, sins of youth, which covered and added new unfortunate different types of obscurities which did not exist based on the initial birth or experience of this person in his initial coming down into this world. With that itself, every nefesh is different, as again Alter Rebbe explained here, and we elaborated on this idea that even by birth there's different nefeshes, the way they're impacted as they journey down into this physical world. But then there's unfortunately the layers that the yid, unfortunately the person himself, puts on that neshama, and there at that point it becomes yet harder to extract that meisha within you, that ability to have that clarity in elokus, because of these layers. And therefore the whole entire process, the entire experience ultimately needs yigia, needs toil. And this is what Alter Rebbe begins today's class, your guide to umatzasi tamid, that if you'll toil umatzasi, you will find. And again, and this is the Gemara says, Tamin, you can believe the person which says, I toiled and I found, which is a kind of a promise. Torah saying, you will toil, you will find. Interesting, the Rebbe many times pointed out, umatzasi, not only you will reach this, what you're toiling for, but you'll reach it in a way of mitzia, like, wow, what is mitzia? Mitzia is you find something. You find something, it's this which you find is disproportionate to what you were toiling for. Someone finds a wallet with $1,000. It's something that it wasn't part of his plan. Maybe he would have stayed indoors. He wouldn't find that wallet. But he went out. He went out to the bank, the seashore, the sea banks, or different places where maybe there's some treasure someone could find. So obviously, if you stay indoors, you won't find it. But once you go out there and you make an effort, you can find stuff that you never even imagined, which means it's disproportionate to your investment. And in this case, the Gemara Torah promises your gaiti, not only v'hisakta, you will reach this which you toiled for, but matzasa, something brand new and totally new, which will come in. And again, Tam, you can believe that person, because Torah guarantees it's going to happen. It would happen, which the Alter Rebbe is encouraging and saying, yes, there are layers over that Moshe, that das and elokus, which is part and parcel of who you are. But your gaiti, through these two ways that the Alter Rebbe explains, certainly in matzasi. Okay, the Ksivi brings another pasuk, which Torah speaks about again, Yiras Hashem, which again through the Moshe Rabbeinu of Deu B'Lev Shalom, you'll be able to serve through that Das and Elokus. You'll be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Lev Shalom with a complete heart. And in this case, even though complete heart, it comprised the Ava V'Yira, love and fear. But again, the Alter Rebbe speaking about, brings this Maimer Azal, this Gemara, which is based on the pasuk Vat Yisrael Ma Hashem Elokecha Hashem Imcha Ki Im Liyiras Hashem Elokecha. Ki Im Liyira, it's about fear. So the Torah, in other words, the emphasis in this Perek is about the natural fear which exists, or the fear which exists within every single yid as a result of his das and elokus. So the pasuk says, if you'll seek it like silver, and like treasures, you will search Oz Tovin Yiras Hashem, and then you will understand the fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You'll appreciate the fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. End of the pasuk. And this is what the pasuk is telling us. Just like when a person searches a treasure, a hidden treasure. Eitzer is a treasure which is hidden. It's in the depth of the earth. That he digs after this treasure with great toil. Kach, the pasuk is saying, that one has to dig with intense, strenuous effort, to reveal the treasure of Yira Shamayim, in other words, the fear of heaven, which is hidden and concealed in the heart of the Yid. Bebinas Halev literally means in the appreciation and understanding of the heart, which means the consciousness of this Yira, which exists in the heart. Shall Kol Odom Yisrael. Again, the Alter Rebbe writes, again, similar to what he wrote before, Beis Yisrael. This is not related to the elite, to the scholarly, to the pious, but Kol Odom Yisrael, which exists by every single Yid. And whatever the level the Yid is, age, stage, and so on. V'shehi, which this Ibchinas Madrega, this level of Yiras Hashem, Shalamayla Me'azman, which is higher than time. What does it mean higher than time? V'yira tivas hamsuseres, and now this is the natural and innate fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is embedded in every single Yid. What is the point that it's higher than time? Which means it's not confined on the dynamic of time. Which means just like we think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem is the one who creates time. Time at a certain point didn't exist. Just as an example, to appreciate what does Alter Rebbe mean, L'mayla mi'azman, which means time is not relevant. And when we think about, for example, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, what was there before Hashem created the world? Hashem created the world so many years ago. So what was there prior to Hashem created the world? So there's nothing. What does it mean nothing? We can't appreciate nothing because we're part of the something. To us, appreciate nothing is like a desert without any trees, any production and so on. No, there was no desert. There was no just empty space. There was nothing, but we cannot appreciate nothingness because we were created immediately. We're part of this something, which is Eilam. Similarly, when we say that time began when Hashem created the world, what was it before? The clock wasn't ticking. There was no clock ticking. I don't mean a physical clock. There was the whole concept of time did not exist. Because the concept of time begins in the level, like it's explained in Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe elaborates on this in Shar Yichud Memuna, from Malchus. Malchus Kol Ilamin. From the level of Malchus, then there's a new, it introduces the phenomenon of Eilam, of world, which world is comprised from time and place, and time and space. As we say, Melech, Malchus, the pasuk says, Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech. When it comes to Malchus, there's past, present, future. When it comes in levels higher than Malchus, this whole idea of time does not exist. Hashem is metaphysical. In other words, it's beyond the whole phenomenon which is associated with Eilam. Not only the physicality of Eilam, even the spiritual Eilam, it doesn't exist, this whole idea, prior to the level of Malchus. Again, we once explained it a little more, but in brief, higher than Malchus, it doesn't exist. You speak about Shem Havaya, which is really represents the sphere is higher than Malchus. What is the expression of Havaya? Because Haya, Haybe, V'yeh Ke'echad. Let's explain what is Yud Kei Vavke, Yud Kei Vavke, Haya, Haybe, V'yeh Ke'echad. Past, present, and future is Ke'echad, is one. It's not divided. Only when it comes to Malchus do we say Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech. The idea of Zman, time begins in Malchus. So before Hashem created the world, there wasn't, or like one would say, why did Hashem create the world 5,000 plus years ago? Why didn't He create the world 1,000,000 years ago? But that's not a question, because the whole idea of 5,000, as an example, began when Hashem created the world. Because before Hashem created the world, time didn't exist. So look, just like we find in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Hashem Himself is transcendent of time and place. So too, and therefore, generally, Hashem is not limited to time and place. Like one would say, Hashem, when He gave the Torah, that He knew what's going to be in the 21st century. That's a very odd question, because the whole idea of thousands of years that begins in the most inferior expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Beyond that, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, theoretically, doesn't exist in Torah. The world was created for 6,000 years, but conceptually, it's not an issue, it's not a factor, because where Hashem is for Himself, by Himself, time doesn't exist. And hence He's not limited with time. When we say Hashem knows what goes on from one side of the world to the other, it's not Hashem has dynamic eyes. The idea of space just begins from the level of Malchus, which is an inferior expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Beyond that, doesn't exist time or place. And therefore, because Hashem is beyond that, Hashem created time and place. So understandably, He's not limited to time and place. It's not a reality. And so too, when we think about the Yiras Hashem, because it's part of the neshama, and the neshama is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is like to say, when is a Yid? On Tuesdays? When he's aroused by an important arousal of a gathering, 10,000 people speaking about God and godliness. Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, they're blowing the shofar, dancing on Simchas Torah. The Yid is the Yid always, because the Yid is a chelik l'kamimal. The Yid is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always, so the Yid is always. The Yid is not limited to situations, the phenomenon of time and place, which is again associated with Olam, with world, with the confinement and limitation of Olam, which begins subtly with that first change, quantum leap changes. Al Tarab explains the Shayich of Emunah from the previous levels prior to Malchus, basically the way the areas where the Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was manifest, to Malchus, where that then begins, the Malchus Chamalchus Kol Olamim, the whole phenomenon of Olamis. Olam, you remember the Gemara, the Olam is B'lashon Hel v'Hester, a world by definition, even the most supreme worlds by definition, they conceal and they obscure the purity and the reality of Elokus. Because it begins a new phenomenon of time and place, and obviously in this more supreme Olamis, time and place express themselves very differently, the way it unfolds in this very physical world, the Olam Asiyah. But nonetheless, somewhat of Zman, as explained in Kabbalah and other places, called Seder Zmanim. It began once Malchus comes into the picture, Hashem Melech, Hashem